Hey guys, Angus, and today I'm going to show you how to set up the Nikon D3200 DSLR. So DSLRs can actually be quite complicated, and to actually get them setting up straight away can be quite difficult. So this is going to be a tutorial basically for all beginners that's actually just got a DSLR or actually plan to actually start using one. So in this tutorial, I'll go over the basics from changing the screen brightness to actually setting up the camera to take photos. So starting right from the beginning, one of the things you'll definitely need is the body and of course the lens. So it's most likely that your camera has actually come with a 18 to 55mm standard lens. This one I'm actually using is the VR2 lens, which actually comes from the D3300. And of course, to actually power the device, you'll need the battery, which will come in a separate packet, and that can be accessed from the bottom of the device. Make sure the battery is actually fully charged and then slot it into the bottom of the device. The next thing you'll need to actually record all your photos and videos is an SD card. Unfortunately, manufacturers like Nikon and Canon don't actually supply SD cards, so this will actually need to be bought separately. The SD card port can easily be accessed from the side of the camera. If you intend to take any action shots, then I definitely recommend that you get a Class 1 SD card. This is mainly because a Class 1 SD card will have a fast buffer speed, and this will mean that it will be able to let the camera process the images quicker, and this will mean that you can take photos quicker. I'd highly recommend that you get a SD card with a high capacity, preferably maybe 32GB, mainly because the images taken on the D3200 will be much bigger than the standard images taken on a phone. Attaching the lens is actually really easy. Just clip it into the front and that will allow you to actually start taking images straight away. So if you go to the top of the device, you'll have the main buttons that control the entire camera. You have the on and off switch, then you have the speed dial and the three buttons. First one for recording video, the second one for displaying separate info, and the third for altering the exposure. So most of these buttons you won't actually need to worry about at all. I'll explain those in a separate video. Just switch the camera on from the top. So once you turn the DSLR on, the screen will greet you with the main UI and it will be set to the actual mode you're currently on. So for this one I'm on auto. What you'll want to do next is go to the lens and actually put it to auto, because that will mean that it'll allow you to actually focus it, and you want to put VR on. If you've got a separate camera, then you can easily detach it, just pressing the button and then sliding it down. And of course, if you want to reattach it, then you just do the same thing over again and slide it back in. If you want to place the camera on a bracket, then you can easily use the screw hole in the bottom. So one thing worth doing is actually altering the viewfinder, and what you can actually do is use the dial, and this allows you to actually change the focus as people have different eyesight. For most people, the focus should be fine, but you may want to alter it to make sure it's sharp as possible. And of course, you can always remove the rubber piece as well if that's too distracting. If you want to start recording video, then you press the LV button, and then from there it'll actually give you a live mode. And then from there, if you want to record video, you actually press the red button on the top. So there'll be tons of controls and different buttons on the display, but you won't really need to worry about that. I would advise that you go to auto, and then from there you can easily start taking as many photos as you want. For a beginner, you don't really need to worry about any of the extra buttons that you're confused about, as I'll go over that entirely on a separate video. Okay, so what you want to do next is actually press the menu button, and then from there you'll actually get the setup. So for some it may actually be set to a different page, but you press the left button and then you go to the top. So you don't actually need to worry about this playback button as well. You don't need to worry about any of this stuff. And then just go to the camera symbol and select reset shooting menu. From there, what I'd advise is actually going to image quality and actually selecting what you would like to do. So the way I decided for the image quality would be dependent on your skill and actually the size of the SD card you have. So if you have a high capacity SD card and you're a complete beginner, then I'd highly recommend that you go to JPEG normal. But if you have a low capacity SD card, then I'd definitely recommend going to JPEG. Of course, if you're an amateur or a professional, then I'd highly recommend going to JPEG Fine or NEF RAW. After you selected that, you can go back and actually go to image size, and then I'd actually recommend for anyone that you select the large format, because this will allow you to take the full size 24.1 megapixel images. Then from there, I'd actually recommend going straight to movie settings and then actually selecting what frame rate you would actually like. So for the best quality, you want to go on 1920 by 1080, but if you want a movie style, then you go on 24p. But if you want to do slow motion, then I'd recommend that you actually go to 60p. And of course, if you want to start recording, you press the LV button, and then you want to go to the top button and press the red button. As soon as you hit record, you'll be able to actually see it on the actual electronic viewfinder and the screen, and then it will show you a record button, it will give you the actual time, and of course it will give you the audio levels as well. And to stop recording, of course, you just press the button again and you can play back it straight away. After that, I'd actually recommend going to the spanner option and resetting the setup options again. And of course, if you haven't actually got any data on your memory card and I'd advise formatting it, but that will completely get rid of all the data on it. So of course you can actually change the monitor brightness, and I'd recommend that you put it to 0, but if you want the best battery life then you want to put it on -3. Of course you can do small things like changing the color as well. I wouldn't worry about any of these settings, including video mode, as the differences between PAL and NTSC is actually very complicated, and I highly recommend that you do not worry about it at all. So from there I'd advise that you scroll down and actually set the time zone, because this will actually be recorded on SD card. Of course setting the language as well, and you can of course add a image comment as well, which is quite a nice touch. And then you can go down and actually select auto image rotation, so rotate it as soon as you play back the image if it's actually landscape. And if you just want to see the changes that you've actually made with the actual layout, then you can actually press the shutter button and it will take you to the first layout that you actually see. So you may want to do other things like actually doing self-timer photos, and then from there you actually want to press the button above the trash symbol and pressing that, and then this will allow you to do some small things like using the remote, which is the quick response remote, and then from there you can actually do other things like selecting the actual self-timer, and then from there you can actually select the settings. I would have preferred if it had all of the actual settings, but of course you can do small things like actually selecting the number of photos that are actually taken when you do the self-timer. This is not the number of photos that are actually taken at the same time, but the number of photos it takes over again. So if you select it to 9 photos at once, it will actually take 9 photos, one after the other, when you actually select it. So there is just a setup tutorial on the Nikon D3200. Of course, if you did find this tutorial helpful, then definitely be sure to give this video a thumbs up. But apart from that, thanks for watching. But I definitely think that it's got loads and loads of really good aspects, because it doesn't just jump straight into sci-fi. It sort of does quite a nice build up, and then it shows all the really awesome possibilities of what they can do with visual effects. Of course, it's not just sci-fi that they've put into this film, it's also action, and I think there is some really cool stuff. So for example, there's a lot of battles between, so I'm not actually going to mention it to avoid spoilers, but I think there's some really good action. Probably my favourite thing to do with this film has to be the cinematography. I really think that they've nailed it, mainly because it is a high budget film and they really can get the visual effects to work with the cinematography. But I felt it was really good because the way they used it wasn't just about getting the cinematic shots, they did some first person shots, they did loads and loads of different awesome angles, and I felt that it really worked. Also, what I kind of liked is that they made it kind of confusing in the story, but they definitely answered all the questions that I was thinking about.